I have intimate knowledge of what the US currently knows about UFOs minus the last 2 years. UFOs are primarily unmanned drones. UFOs are built to spec each time they are deployed. UFOs are created by a mobile construction facility that hides in the ocean. Construction facility destroys anything that comes close to it and will disappear for days when approached aggressively. US believes the facility has been active on Earth for at least 100 years or much longer. Fire away on questions, I'll answer what I can, you won't be disappointed.
Is it related to that one under rock in that one Scandinavian country? The one that deploys within tectonic spaces?
No, this one almost never leaves the Bermuda Triangle.
Bullshit. Governments have, and have had for a while, advanced anti-gravity crafts.
You asked if the particular UFOs we study are the result of a foreign government, not if other governments have shittier versions. Speed alone tells us what we are looking at.
Do the UAPs return back to the manufacturing unit?
Yes, some come in and leave the planet, but very rarely. Usually, the same number that comes in goes out unless special circumstances arise. It feels more like a carrier but with construction capability.
What are the purposes of the UAPs? Surveillance of humans?
The US believes they are not here to harm us. They only seem interested in us once they realize we are destroying things around us, including each other. One of the officials in charge said something that stuck with me. They act like keepers of a zoo, uninterested in the daily life of wildlife until there's a problem.
I can approach that facility without being attacked?
LOL. The last unit we saw approach the facility didn't even have time to communicate they were being attacked before it was over.
What's buried under the mesa on Skinwalker Ranch? Is that show even legitimate? It seems like some of the most legitimate research on anything paranormal that I've ever seen in my life. And I'm very curious about what they seem to be finding.
No idea that the project, if any, is likely kept separate.
There were 2 rare elements found fused together that were under the mesa, and I'm very curious what's going on there.
No idea about that either. The crafts we recover are built with numerous elements. Some aren't even obtainable here.
An OP is a lying if he's not back in 30 minutes.
My nap was good at least.
Are they friends?
They cut their losses when crashes are recovered. Same with personnel. Zookeepers aren't friends with the animals.
Do you know if the entities behind the UFOs are native to the Earth? Like an older civilization, breakaway civilization, or a civilization of humans that escaped a previous cycle of cataclysm due to their advanced tech?
Limited expertise since my role is more craft/analysis. US believes they are foreign to our world. A previous cataclysm could make sense. They also show up in times of strife such as natural events.
Also, I think that other guy who was talking about approaching the area without being attacked is a remote viewer.
I lurked on other boards but haven't really been to this one since I was comfortable with the answers I had. I wasn't aware that was a thing on here. There were rumors among my coworkers that they had psionic abilities, but honestly, it rarely comes up in a conversation. Give it a shot?
Have you tried sending in a raft of hippies? I may not recognize them as a threat, JK.
Based on previous disappearances and acts of hostility, we believe the construction facility, carrier, has learned what is and isn't hostile. Usually, it will just move away or stay deep under the water. It doesn't fire on civilian boats, for example. Exceptions apply. We have seen 1 or 2 go missing, usually after sharp turns, etc.
Any relation to Antarctica?
My section monitored just this craft and any interactions it attempted. A previous coworker did mention something in passing of Antarctica at one point, but I ignored it if I'm being honest. Talking about other projects is considered career suicide.
How about the destination of the space orbs? Is Jupiter a potential destination? I believe they are keeping a massive orb inside of the gas giant, though I have no evidence but many dreams of it.
No idea. If it is a project, I haven't seen it. No orbs out of the construction facility, just UFOs.
What units have been lost approaching this construction machine? Why have they not sent a Sea Wolf to investigate the Jimmy Carter with its nanotech?
Everything you can think of, really. At one point, nuclear missiles were being toyed with again, and we deployed fighters and a sub with serious intent. Everything except the sub was lost.
How have they come to the conclusion the UAP being released are ET? If they don't know what the UAP are to begin with, or if there is nothing inside them, it's a pretty big jump to go right to ET.
They crash sometimes, parts fail, and gravity engines near the surface of the planet can be like crossing an intersection. We recover these and sometimes find passengers. We mostly see drones now. Back in the earlier days we saw a lot more piloted craft.
Why do you not know anything about the last 2 years? Just curious.
Moved on from the project because of new management that didn't trust older proven methods.
Also, LOL, the last unit we saw approach the facility didn't even have time to communicate they were being attacked before it was over. Any details on what happened?
Normal approach details. Pilot responsive and actively talking. The feed cuts out pilot still talking, suddenly nothing. Poor guy likely had no idea it was likely a suicide mission. Based on what we've seen, the construction facility has far superior weapons than the UFOs do. This weapon destroys the matter it hits entirely. It also shits on anything electronic in the vicinity.
The contents and equipment usually mimic the intended purpose too, like the equipment share a pattern, specific to its purpose.
Yes, usually when we find a thinner model, for example, it would have no pilot and a lot of sensory hardware. My favorite is finding one that is fitted for research. If we are lucky, we find things we have never seen before. Before I left, we were looking at what we thought was a lab of some kind for genetics.
Are you talking about the one shaped like a pear or a burger?
Be more specific.
Disregard it's the burger ones, isn't it?
Size, shape and speed are usually the factors we use to determine what the purpose of the UFO is. We get it wrong sometimes. They can be quite large, and both pear and burger shapes are known builds.
Is this the burger-shaped ones or the pear-shaped ones?
Both.
I've had 2 orange orbs approach me to within 100 feet one night. Glowing translucent, but rather dim like the setting sun seen through smog. They were flying in 45-degree formation like this, about 50 miles per hour.
Research/science vessels sometimes have mobile light-producing cameras, used for multiple purposes from scouting to keeping threats contained or at bay. These are shaped like hammers and when operated are extremely bright. Red lights are a sign of hostility or caution to deploy weapons. Orange lights are usually for spotting minerals or living things.
As soon as I blinked my flashlight at them, they accelerated to several thousand knots and disappeared over the horizon. Searched YouTube and found several videos of the same objects, mostly near San Diego.
I'm not surprised. The range on those is quite large. The UFO was likely somewhere above you, quite high up.
Is the underwater base near Catalina Island creating these?
No, this one has only left the Atlantic Ocean twice. Both times were before I arrived.
Are aliens human or humanoid?
Humanoid. Very humanoid.
Then do you know anything about abductions, forced breeding programs, etc.?
Bodies are removed before we are allowed to perform work. We definitely see some passing by, hence changes in older proven methods, by new management.
Also, real true disclosure anytime soon?
The Air Force is extremely frustrated with the lack of progress on their end. We felt similar but are unable to share details with them.
So I'd assume this was a sort of AI design that seems to be advanced, yet already prepared for the get-go.
Can you rephrase this? Basically, when designed to, let's say, be a miner, you will usually see hardware dedicated to resource collection on the vessel. If the vessel is something scientific, you may encounter things like tools, and as previously mentioned, something akin to a lab. We thought of it more as I need to go hiking. So the construction facility builds you a car, UFO, and packs it full of hiking supplies and even adjusts the shape to fit what was packed.
Do you think there are fewer piloted crafts because the population of the facility, if any, is declining?
No, the common consensus is that they are just being careful. I've heard recovery of living pilots usually doesn't go well for either of us. We suspect they piloted a lot of initial craft due to early complications. We also saw more crashes.
Any bodies recovered show any ranges of aging we can recognize. I wonder if most of the inhabitants are either old or dead at this point, though younger bodies would disprove that, I suppose.
No idea about age, not my specialty, and asking about it would have been a net negative, especially now. Previous higher-ups were getting better about being open with information since discovery happened quicker.
What do the passengers look like? Are they biological and/or android?
Bio.
Do you know anything about people such as Stephen Greer, Lou Elizondo, or whatever, etc.? Are these people in the know, or LARPers, or controlled misinfo, etc.?
No idea. One name sticks out you didn't mention. Mentioning Bob Lazar by name would likely have you taken out back and put down like a dog. Do the math on why.
Out of everything ever found regarding UFOs in general, what is your personal favorite?
New engine was deployed with a very large model that I had never seen before. We usually see 3 to 5 gravity-producing engines. This one had 7. Favorite object or find? Probably the lab, since we never fully understood how it worked before it was destroyed.
Makes me wonder whether a meaningful distinction between scientific study and amusement still exists for them, if it ever did.
This was before my time, but they talked about a bus UFO that had more occupants than hardware. Most of the intended purpose appeared to be for physical viewing. I wondered if they ever just wanted to look at the animals.
How long until we can hang with aliens?
Have any retarded cousins that destroy everything they touch? When do you want to see them again?
This is a strangely recurrent theme. At a minimum, they have psychotronic devices of some sort.
This reminded me of something in my first year. UFO crashes, they remove the bodies well before my team arrives. We start to look and the craft is unpowered at first. A few minutes later the craft powers on and starts to close up. We radio out and get a response from the unit removing one of the occupants, whoa, alien, that they are working on it. Ship powers off and the other team asks if we are good to go. No mention of how access was possible. I suspect the pilot may have interfaced with the ship by remote or psionic ability.
Not really translucent, but maybe the outer shell was. They definitely had an inner core that wasn't see-through.
Lots of tools they use produce light. If this is still about the orb, the shell you may have seen was just the light around the device I called the hammer.
It's suggested that the ones with beings in it may be some sort of projection/illusion.
Genuinely curious what the fuck you're on about.
Are there more than one construction facility? You mentioned one in the Bermuda Triangle. However, there are a lot of USOs off of the west coast of the Americas as well. Any insight?
I suspect there may be, since we only watch the Atlantic Ocean and the UFOs we track normally don't stray far from home base. Asking about it would have been a bad move.
I'm talking about the MCUs. Are you talking about the one in the Pacific or the Arctic?
Atlantic? I don't know of others. The mention of something in the Arctic was weird and brief when it came up.
Is the MCU? You are talking about a burger shape or a pear shape, need to know.
Burgerish. I misunderstood and thought you meant the UFOs, not the carrier/construction facility.
OP talk about hybridization of the human race. Pro tip, you're a shill, or UI, if you only knew how bad things are.
I wouldn't fuck my retarded cousin, but I also understand I'm on 4chan.
I read somewhere some UFO navigation systems require an ET whose own personal wavelength has been specifically attuned to the neural network of the craft.
This tracks somewhat for me. When we look at the craft, we usually have to force certain things to work. 2 teams come behind mine so that could be dedicated to understanding of the craft.
Can you tell us what they look like physically? Usual gray type or big ears?
Imagine the typical grays you see on TV. I've seen 2 corpses, so maybe there are different species, but I've never laid eyes on another.
Anything about their culture, name, etc.?
Rumors mostly. They almost never want anything to do with us. Mentions of destruction or warfare apparently change their attitude pretty quickly.
Precisely. Another massive problem is determining which aspects of encounters is physically real.
We rely on our biological and technological sensors too much to be able to truly understand the phenomenon, in my opinion.
That's a hell of a claim. Any particular incident? I assume you're referring to the various nuclear site incursions.
I guess global conflict wasn't a good term, lol. I meant more of tension. The nuclear site incursions, the airspace violations has also been increasing tensions. From what I understand, the Roswell incident increased tension between US and Soviets. There's security tensions behind other countries gaining access to information or materials surrounding the phenomenon. There has been great domestic tension within the US, intel agencies, military, disinformation campaigns, etc. Why did the UFOs fuck up all those people in Brazil? Sauce? Might let me give you more insight.
Was it by accident of them not knowing we'd be damaged by their equipment, or do they not care?
If found, they usually monitor us. If approached at an uncomfortable distance, they flee. When cornered, it doesn't end well. Their tools can do harm to us even for just scientific purposes. We think they just don't care.
Do you believe we are under their control in some way, or were some time in history?
Possibly, but I have no way of knowing. The higher-ups I worked for seemed hell-bent on discovering more about them. Usually not a quality found among controlled beings.
What were the main reasons for the crashes? I'd think random lightning or freak accidents, seeing how advanced they are.
You'd be surprised how many mistakes they make, especially the further back you look. One area they seem to avoid like the plague we suspect is due to issues with gravity and flight. Before they figured it out, we collected quite a few mishaps there. They've tried to shoot some down, mostly over nuclear incidents, but failed miserably.
Did you see written symbols in the craft?
Yes, usually marked by doorways and key objects. Written language appears frequently on tools and critical items.
Also, it reads like their objective is to observe and preserve?
I agree. The idea was pitched that they are waiting for us to mature or perhaps something bigger to arrive, and they don't want us to ruin the planet in the meantime.
What do you believe to be the reason for the uptick in sightings?
Once again, my knowledge was cut off about 2 years ago. If you mean very recently, my guess would be the Russians and US having a little secret dance amongst themselves. When nuclear anything gets involved, we see large deployments for long periods of time. Strife seems to be the catalyst.
Also, what is your scariest experience while engaging with the phenomenon? What was your favorite, if any?
Doors closing on us as mentioned above made me wish I had brown pants. Still fascinated with the lab we found. It was damaged by accident and I never really got much time with it.
Are you aware of any foreign A tech that was successfully reverse engineered?
Yes, we used to laugh at Russian and Chinese designs. We stopped laughing at China when they produced an operational, but buggy, version of their mining equipment. Still stumps most of our engineers. China also lies out of its ass, but from what we saw we deemed it operational and working. Countries listed above have flight-capable craft, just not very good ones. I'm honestly surprised no one has asked about the energy source or internals. Heading out for the night, but we'll be on tomorrow to answer more.
Why?
One example was shortly after I joined. They said one was downed but 2 occupants were alive. The first team couldn't get close without being attacked. Aliens never seemed to recover their lost UFOs for whatever reason, so they just waited a few days until they died, then recovered the UFO. Hostility is usually their last option. Genuinely confused about what you're asking me. Recruitment isn't something easy if that's your goal. They usually recruit people with extremely clean background checks, and I never saw anyone under 35.
What is the energy source? You mentioned Bob, so I think I know already.
Correct-ish. The power source is element 115. The thing no one talks about is that usually, they seal it within the craft because it produces its own gravity field. Bob Lazar handled element 115, which was already pulled out, which is rare and weird. Protocol now is that only one person is allowed to handle element 115. I was forbidden from touching or interacting with it. We still have trouble producing this shit too.
How do UFOs travel? In the context of those Tic Tac reports and Bob Lazar's report/video, where they seemingly jump through space-time and light to appear in a new location? Notice how it just phases to a new location like staggers?
This is common when moving at high speed from a standstill or slow speed initially. Gravity distorts time and the object inside the field can stagger when traveling.
I've heard the craft can detect the presence of a camera and when someone is filming them.
Not unless the craft is put into a mode to detect a lens, no. If the UFO is standing still or hovering though, they won't miss you. You can see a face like you're standing in front of someone a couple of miles out. Doesn't look like a camera, though their eyes are different.
How are you able to talk about any of this? Didn't you swear to secrecy?
Yes, liver cancer sucks.
Wouldn't the government already have their eye on you, considering you could turn out to be a loose end?
I'm not going on national TV or radio. I'm on a 4chan board. I'm sure they look at stuff like this, but cancer makes you feel a little different.
Also, did you or your coworkers experience strange things outside of work that could have been related to what you saw?
No, usually most people working there had no prior interest in UFOs, or at least feigned not having interest. Ask me anything. I'll answer what I can.
Your LARP is bad and you should feel bad.
Learn to read Anon.
Not true. Most zookeepers love their work and love the animals a great deal.
I've wondered if some of them do like us. They definitely have the ability to destroy us.
The spheres are a type of unmanned surveillance drone?
Shaped like a hammer, but when activated, yes, they appear like spheres due to the intense light. They see light differently, and looking into the sun for them isn't an issue like it is for us. I can't speak for the psionic abilities, if any, since I've only heard rumors in passing. We believe the lack of communication was inherent to their personal beliefs about us. As mentioned previously, but active serious discussion about destruction gets them going.
Do you think they're playing some role in stopping rogue entities and dangers from space hurting us on a large scale?
That was another theory, yes. We think they are more interested in keeping the planet safe from us. 2 main suggestions are that we don't spoil the planet before they arrive and take it from us, or they are letting us evolve and grow while preventing devastation.
What do you know about this claim?
Sadly, not enough to give you a good response. Remote viewing is a very strange thing. It's shown to work at times, but most of the time it doesn't, or the conclusions have fuzzy connections, as if forced. As for the interdimensional aspect of it, I don't believe there's anything actually interdimensionally happening. It's just our best way to try and grasp/perceive what's going on behind the veil. From what I understand, whatever is behind the phenomenon has the ability to manipulate matter/energy in similar ways that we can manipulate information. We can create 3D realities and manipulate them via our understanding of machine code and linear algebra. It also seems to be able to play around with space-time, almost as if we are sitting on, or perceiving time that's been homogeneously transformed, into projective space, while they are free to move about homogeneous space. If they haven't entered the projection space, Then they could freely move about our space without interacting with it until they collapse their space/coordinates into our projective space, normalizing their position with their homogeneous coordinate.
Why does image analysis by someone competent on the original UFO always show weird stuff?
Gravity and the reflective nature of the craft usually.
Am I right in assuming the disco lights is just air-absorbing radiation and being completely saturated by it?
No.
What materials are these UFOs made of?
That answer gets complicated quickly. Short answer is an alloy that we cannot reproduce but only repurpose. This alloy is kind of like a film that fits over the frame of the craft. I mentioned they were built to spec. That's exactly what I mean. The shape is always efficiently designed. The actual frame itself is heavier and composed of more elements. Both of these alloys have a lot of elements we cannot reproduce. One of the main problems when repurposing these alloys is getting them hot enough. They absorb heat very well, and shaping the metal is a tedious process.
Can you quickly walk through the process of identifying the contents of a crashed UFO craft?
First team leaves that deals with occupants and initial discovery. We arrive and meet with an external member of the team who can touch and examine parts we are not allowed to interact with. We never have to cut our way into the UFO. We enter. The first order of business is checking for element 115, then leaving the ship together to send it away. We return and look for any tools and loose objects that can be extracted. We then start to strip any specialized components on board, such as sensory equipment or navigation. We leave, and a third and fourth team arrive, likely to remove the bulk of the craft.
1. Tell me about the mobile construction facility making them.
Shaped like an extremely large UFO, but as one mentioned, more of a burger design. Almost never leaves the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, it will sit through hurricanes and only move elsewhere to release or receive a UFO. No visible weapons or cockpit from SAT footage. It also does not use any lights, unlike other UFOs.
2. Are there no other things making UFOs?
Yes, UFOs arrive and depart Earth, but very infrequently. These UFOs are usually quite large. The US has been itching to get its hands on a freighter UFO when inbound or outbound, but the chance has never presented itself. Leadership openly stated securing one would result in promotion.
That makes sense for the ones like in the military videos. But what about the saucers with multicolored lights? I highly doubt those are drones or military, except for the triangle kind.
Never seen a triangle UFO. Lights are usually on bigger vessels and are sensory in nature. They are also used to spot each other.
Gets asked genuine questions, ignores questions, ignores bonus question.
See below. Take less DMT when you ask questions, and people might take you halfway serious.
People you wouldn't trust to work on your car engine claim they are the go-to guy for examining UFOs. This seems very unlikely.
I'm not here to convince anyone. You'll notice yourself coming back to things I've said over time on your own as understanding increases. Pay attention to the Space Force. We were told this would be a long project. Disinformation was one of the key takeaways. New management was hell-bent on going back to secrecy. They thought we were way too open with our operation.
Sounds like OP's ship is the later form. I would not be surprised if the pilots are in sentient craft.
No, they are remotely controlled or directly controlled.
The zookeeper analogy is strange. Agree with another here, that most zookeepers like their jobs and care about the animals. They display high levels of empathy.
Some of the tools designed for abduction would make you rethink this. A lot of them cause pain or harm. A common tool we find is one that seems to scramble coherent thoughts and make the subject childlike. The best way I can describe its use is like forcing a stroke without actually having one. It makes you delirious but also childlike for a few hours.
Are these beings incapable of empathy? Do they have emotions? I assume they must have learned something from the recovered bodies.
Never interacted with them, only heard information passed along. They can be upset though with previously mentioned topics. They definitely have emotion.
Are they from off-world and true ETs?
The US and leadership were adamant they were off-world.
Why the cloak and dagger?
You're asking the same questions leadership struggled with. We were not entirely sure.
If the Air Force is confused like you say, why is it the only agency we know of that is not cooperating with Congress in the AARO?
You might get a laugh out of this. The USAF is kept in the dark. We operated above them. A close coworker wondered if even the president knew. Namely, Trump, because we both thought he would just tell everyone.
Any idea what they might be waiting for?
Personally, I think they just want us to grow and become sentient. UFOs arrive all the time and dock with the mobile construction unit. The way I see it, travel time is quite fast. If something was coming to destroy us, it would have arrived already.
Finding out the truth made them cry and fear for the lives their offspring will live.
I've always suspected my department was under a much higher one with more information. I can't speak to any horrors or worries since none were mentioned unless we were pitching theories. As I stated above, I think a lot of US top brass don't even know about it. I heard the phrase "fuck Bill Clinton" thrown around regarding access to information. I'm pretty sure he asked if I'm not mistaken.
Credible. Remote viewing? Pick one and on.
Is this an actual thing on here? Genuinely curious. Would have lurked more if I had the time.
Are they human looking or do they resemble something else? Is it something we've seen written about in UFO topics or pop culture?
They are smaller than humans and look like your typical gray aliens you see. Holes for ears, and they can look at very bright objects without being blinded. I've never seen one move their mouth, but I've also never interacted with one.
What do you know about these? Operation Fishbowl.
Nothing.
Varginha crash.
Nothing.
Roswell crash.
They were accurate on some things. The material could have been internal components or small pieces of the alloy around the craft. The alloys I saw looked different from the pictures.
Operation Moondust.
Rumors only.
That is a target balloon used by the USS Trepong. I believe they were in the Arctic or Antarctic. It is not a UFO/UAP. The orange glow is obviously from being hit by weapons fire. The flammable gas used to rapidly inflate the balloon caught fire.
You asked for my opinion and I gave you one. The photo also isn't the best. I judged based on what I've seen previously.
Besides Russians, do any Europors have data or programs researching this as well?
They are mostly in the dark, and probably on the same level as the USAF.
Are you with the OPRP?
No.
And did SOCOM put up that open public contract trying to get someone to build them? What equates to one of these UFO, in terms of capability, as a honeypot to try and catch non-human actors in military contracting companies?
No idea. From my limited knowledge of the bio side, I doubt they are trying to infiltrate us. They seem to know a lot about us. Abductions still occur mostly in areas with contamination or disease.
Did you hear anything related to a U.S. secret space program? Not that I put any credibility into the words of Corey Good et al., but Gary McKinnon claimed to see files describing off-world personal and ship names that did not exist.
Yes, the U.S. wants to be able to leave the solar system with their craft and explore. They were working tongue-in-cheek with the Russians before I left. I'm sure the invasion of Ukraine put a stop to that rather quickly.
Do all nations coordinate their efforts studying this Bermuda Triangle factory, or is each doing their own thing?
Each of them do their own thing. U.S. is pretty greedy with what it finds. We will usually extract information but never offer any in return.
What is the mining tool China has supposedly reverse-engineered capable of?
Hard to explain if you haven't seen it. Basically, it extracts the minerals via beam/light directly out of the rock. It has the ability to fill the rock to some degree. China was able to figure out how it works and make a similar version. The problem with the one they built is it only operates for a few seconds before it runs out of power. They still don't understand element 115. It also exploded one time and they had to remake it.
Are the made-to-spec craft, you described just the metal-looking spheres observed and brought up in the latest AARO hearings, seem to be lots of orbs, disks, and tic-tacs.
Yes, this is exactly why they always look so different. Things like triangles and hard-edged squares don't exist though. Pill shapes are extremely sought after and some we think are freighters.
Not a huge variety you'd expect from made-to-spec craft.
The best analogy I can give for the variety/spec comment is, think of it like wrapping food in tinfoil on a plate. It's a bad analogy but you get the idea. Usually they will always be round or oval, sometimes even pill-shaped. The tinfoil fits the intended function of covering everything without squishing it.
Even stories of MJ-12 suspect the president didn't have a need to know.
Staff at our agency were usually older and had been there forever. This tracks when considering term limits.
Described crying in fear.
You make me worry I've missed things.
Many abduction stories seem malevolent.
Previous post I mentioned tools. I think the harm they cause is the same as cutting open a mouse to check the local population for signs of bad health in a population. Collateral damage.
Do they just not like humans and like the planet? What's to stop them from just culling us all?
They could absolutely destroy us if they wanted to. They have started launch sequences before that we suspect were tests on what they are dealing with. My personal view is they have to stay out of our way but keep us from destroying ourselves. I imagine life elsewhere in the universe often destroys itself.
Do you think we will get more answers from the government, disclosure, as in them telling us aliens exist, or will the cover-up continue?
At one point they briefed us about opening up information about the craft but not the construction unit. Nothing happened for months. New leadership shows up suddenly, it's back to bullshit and secrets again.
As to the USAF, they must have images and video of these things pretty close up. You'd think they would be the agency with the most knowledge of the subject?
The USAF's goal is to fight other countries. They have footage, but it was mostly discovered and recorded by sheer chance. The Space Force, however, will be an entirely new thing. Their focus is similar to ours with a sprinkle of disinformation.
Are all craft related to this factory in Grays?
The ones we looked at, yes.
Or are there more species coming here?
Possible, but I wasn't made aware. It wouldn't shock me. I've wondered if we are being protected from others.
Same fag it all you want. There's a very good reason you're refusing to answer these specific questions.
I could have just ignored you. See your local politician for examples.
Do we produce it, or is it collected from other craft and just recycled? Because that seems to be the case.
We tried to produce it and failed. We produce a shitty variant of it and use it for certain parts we build. Most of what we use for things that cannot be replaced is recycled. Our ability to rehash their shit has gotten better slowly.
Or is it used up to the point we need to produce it to continue testing?
They set aside certain amounts for research. Most of it goes towards reuse.
Is there tech that was gained from these craft that the military widely uses today, or civilians for that matter?
A lot of your stealth aircraft sport smoother designs for one. Learning to track them also helped with targeting software. Laser technology comes to mind since it's a crippled version of what they use. Most of what I saw was way above us. It's hard to put the hammers, and how you see through them, into words. It's not like a drone camera, and it's not a clear image, to us at least.
Can you clarify?
They have a distinct fascination with radiation. Remember how I mentioned they don't go far from home base? When Fukushima happened, the construction facility deployed multiple UFOs to the location over multiple weeks. They were also very interested in Ebola at one point. We can't confirm abductions there since the local population is... You get the idea, no one cared.
According to Elizondo, Italians seem to have a good grasp on the phenomenon, including that they originate somewhere from the Mediterranean. Is it possible that there is another UFO factory there?
Starting this thread and seeing everyone mention the Arctic has me wondering if there were others. It would make sense with other sightings since, as mentioned previously, far from home is rare.
Does the moon hold anything of interest?
No, that I'm aware of. We know that UFOs entering and exiting the atmosphere do not go towards any known planet often.
1. Are the flying orbs just scouts, research drones?
Do you mean orbs in the sky? Or do you mean landed craft deploying them? I've mentioned previously that there are tools that are shaped like hammers. They emit extremely bright light and are used as a sort of drone or scout. They are able to view almost 360 degrees and detect everything from minerals to bio. If a human encounters them, they usually are deployed to keep watch and figure out when to wrap up and leave.
2. Do you think they interfere with our general science or investigations?
Yes, they do not want to be studied. They also do not collect downed craft or occupants. It seems to be an oh fucking well approach. Element 115 is the exception. They don't seem to enjoy the idea of us toying with it.
Do they seem to learn when the craft get caught?
Yes, there is an area they actively avoid in Mexico, among others. They also deploy more drones than piloted craft unless absolutely necessary.
Do they become harder to capture next time?
Yes.
3. Is the technology they reproduce increasing rapidly or lags for years?
I wouldn't say it's an increase in technology. It's more like adjustment/better understanding of how to operate. It's one reason we thought about 100 years for the first deployment of the construction facility. If we're here for years, we would have seen the majority of all adjustments made.
4. Is your det using AI to learn more about the findings you make around their tech?
Not when I was around last. No. Taking a break for a bit, but we'll be on later tonight.
Does the factory produce any signature, heat, electromagnetic? How do you track it?
Both. We rely mostly on detecting the gravity it produces. It normally doesn't produce heat outright. When it does, we believe it's in the process of construction, since a small heat buildup can be detected when a craft returns or exits. We think this happens when it's being broken back down into parts or assembled. We can only detect these heat signatures when it's near the surface of the ocean, so sometimes a UFO will pop out on us.
How do you know about other countries' efforts?
We don't obtain the information directly, it's passed along to us. My guess would be the typical way we get anything such as spying and bribery.
And why does the USAF not know about the other countries' efforts but your department does?
My department sits above the USAF for UFO recovery and information in the same way the USAF sits above me on military plans for Ukraine. We were told at the time if we had to give away information, only tell the public what the USAF knows. I'm pretty sure other countries know departments like mine exist.
Alternatively, do they know about U.S. efforts?
Russia and China, yes. Others it depends on the level of information. Some governments still don't know aliens even exist or aren't sure.
How do we know you aren't some FBI agent or other glowy?
There's no way for me to prove that to you. You should always be asking though. All I can say is pay attention to things as time progresses and you'll be able to look back and see I was right.
The government does know about them, but only at the majestic level.
I stated before I'm not naming the department. The term majestic was considered outdated.
The symbols that you did see, do they remind you of any other symbols that you have seen on Earth?
No, just what I mentioned.
Hey, OP, what do you make of the Eric Davis memo? I believe you, by the way.
Can you link it for me?
How many craft do we have at the moment?
I don't know. I can tell you I've seen about 18 different models pass through for testing and research.
Is Lockheed Martin involved in reverse engineering?
They are a great company, aren't they?
1. Can you describe some of the other tools found on wrecked craft?
We have found things as simple as basic tools akin to tweezers to the lab. One that sticks out to me was an oval-shaped silver ball that would change colors based on how close it was to a source of energy. Another would be a sheet of metal that allowed you to view bones by placing it near someone's hand, etc.
2. Can you describe any injuries or deaths that occurred involving alien craft?
I've witnessed no deaths or injuries aside from corpses. I never got to see one we had with an abductee, but they weren't sure at the time if she died on impact.
3. Does this image mean anything to you?
No, but I feel like I've seen it. Taking a break for a bit, but we'll be on closer to tomorrow night.
We've been told that Ace use us for food.
Never found any food on board. Could be because they remove it before we arrive.
My question is, are they going to invade humanity en masse?
I think wiping us out would be easy for them currently. No idea why they would wait.
What do you know about element 115?
What I described above. Has its own field of gravity, but it is weak on its own.
Is it really a stable isotope of the element with atomic number 115?
Yes, I'm no expert in that field though we are given the basics.
How would you go about interacting with it?
You can hold it. Removal is done very gently though.
Where is it typically found within downed craft?
Compartment near the engine, usually not far from the center of the craft. If the craft has a frame with a centerpiece, we have to extract it from an angle.
Fake. How can element be anti-gravity? It would fly to space and you couldn't find it.
Maybe my explanation was bad, but I feel like it's just your reading comprehension. It emits a weak field of gravity. It doesn't float away or hover.
Why would they allow you to investigate them?
I think they just cut their losses. We don't get much opportunity otherwise.
Couldn't it be on purpose to see how much you can discover?
Just looking at the way they operate, I doubt it.
And isn't it dangerous that the Chinese have this tech?
The US is quite upset over it. They won't trade either because they know we will trade in bad faith, so they aren't exactly wrong.
Are all models powered by element 115?
Every model I've seen operates this way. I've always wanted to see inside the construction unit for this reason alone.
The Varginha incident.
I had to Google a bit of this. It seems somewhat far out there if I'm being honest.
What's up with anal probes?
I think we both know where this thread would go if I touch on this topic.
Are the female aliens sexy?
The ones with or without probes.
Hey, what about the Zimbabwe incident where a craft with greys landed in Rua, Zimbabwe?
It doesn't seem likely, but here is the kicker. Based on what they described, I believe them minus a few things they said.
Out of curiosity, do you know of any direct contact of agents by them?
Never heard of direct contact started from their end. That doesn't mean we haven't.
I'll never understand this. The current implementation of compartmentalization and complete secrecy is a fool's errand.
One of the minor reasons I'm here, we agree. I do think the initial panic would be really bad, especially for religious communities.
Does the recently disclosed Trinity case have any truth to it? Jacques Vallée wrote a book about it.
No idea.
Could these crashes have happened on purpose?
I doubt it, but answered this earlier in better detail.
Before the 20th century, have they influenced human culture in any way at all?
The US wasn't sure since we don't have information to use. The Sumerian stories were a common topic when talking about at least 100 years. I think it's odd young civilizations knew things they were not supposed to know that far back.
Eric Davis memo link.
Some things in this memo track, a lot of things don't, maybe because I lack knowledge in that area. I did find the date on the third page interesting because 2002 was a very unique year for us.
You are making stuff up.
Okay, see above.
You've mentioned that they get upset at the mention of war and conflict.
Extremely upset if the threat is believable, like war with countries, etc.
So we've communicated with them? How? How many times?
Anytime the topic came up, there was no special mention of communication types, so I assume orally. Quite a few times.
What are they like?
See the zookeeper comment above. It's hard to get them to respond to us in general.
You just described fucking Atlantis.
The US didn't agree this was the case because they didn't have much faith pooled into one Greek and rare mentions. The next post is long, so it may be 2 parts.
I'll be nice and tell you what the image is, although I was using it as a litmus test to see if you were LARPing or not.
This is the internet, Anon. You don't have to be nice. You should be testing me. I'm not against it.
If you know anything else about this, I'd be interested in hearing it.
Just what I said prior.
That image was supposedly one of the victims of Skinwalker Ranch, but it's the best information Gary Nolan could use to demonstrate what was supposedly happening to people in contact with UAPs.
Sounds a bit far out there, but all right.
Allegedly, certain Army personnel who had close encounters with UAPs would have sudden shifts in emotion or would complain of headaches. A few of these people died shortly after coming into contact. When examined, doctors would find evidence of radiation targeting specific areas of the brain. Gary Nolan thinks this is what Havana syndrome actually is/was.
Some tools used for abduction cause confusion and some calm, etc. Some also leave radiation, but nothing crazy.
I've seen a few true believers theorize that if aliens understood human physiology far better than we do, they could influence the brain with some sort of technology we don't really understand. Of course, this would have far-reaching implications about the human brain/mind control/etc.
I can't speak to that area much. As I said previously, the tools aren't friendly ones. They would serve a better purpose wrangling tards than ensuring a patient is content. I'd rather die from cancer.
I have had a white orb psychically interact with me once.
Nothing comes to mind other than the hammers. You can't relay voice or thoughts through them, so I'm not sure.
Twice I've seen UFOs within hours of experiencing world-shattering catastrophic trauma. Are the two related, or is this just a massive coincidence?
They have regulars for abduction. We never observed any repeated stops related to that, though.
Do you still believe in God?
Absolutely not. It has a weird way of making you appreciate everything. I actually taste the water I drink now, if that even makes sense. Appreciate it, though. I'm pretty fucked, though.
Family is important.
They definitely do not view us as family. Tools comment.
Has there been any discussion internally about the origins of these beings and or the mobile facility?
Only amongst ourselves, since we see the direction they enter/leave the solar system briefly. The higher-ups definitely know it just wasn't part of what we did. Once it leaves the planet, ignore it.
I know you had previously said 100 years as an estimate of the facility itself.
The US believes it's one extreme or the other. It arrived around 100 years ago and started the process of discovery and construction versus it's been here since long ago, and oh hey, there is a ton of civilizations talking about this for ages.
Came here long ago from space?
From space, yes. From long ago, I'm not entirely sure, and neither was the US. I lean more towards recent contact.
I'm guessing that the biology department has little to no communication with yours?
I wouldn't know they exist if I didn't see them. We get a basic rundown the higher-ups give us. If we send information forward, it is always passed along.
Any idea what happens to the ships, planes, people that construction unit disappears?
Destroyed near instantly, with no suffering.
Falling for a faked image isn't really helping the credibility of your LARP.
Hey, look at this photo of an animal through fog and rain. Oh, that was a plastic one, sorry. I could have just ignored you entirely.
Can you try to draw some symbols for us?
I can't remember anything specific if I'm being honest. It all looks the same to me.
Does the language look linear like ours?
Yes, but there are soft corners and things like dots, but not many.
A queen bee essentially is the mind of her workers.
If you mean for the construction unit versus UFOs, we wondered that too.
What about the space-time manipulation? Any hunches there?
Never heard any ideas pitched other than the engine/gravity causing time dilation.
Spill the official internal name tag.
Should I send you a copy of my driver's license too?
I agree. OP is not only contradicting actual data we have on UAPs, but is also acting like he has access to all compartmentalized departments of DIA.
If it provides any context, I knew a lot less until I managed the team the last few years. You should be skeptical. I might be on later, but if not, then the afternoon.
Now completely destroyed UFO could be reassembled. Who acts like that? It's like ripping of the RAM of a PC, damaging the MOBO, cutting the wires, pee on the CPU before throwing it into a river. Next team investigate the damage, sends PC to next team and they say, yeah, hard to re-engineer.
The way these are constructed, you cannot take an existing but damaged craft and just add on spare parts from another, close it up and call it good. Human repairs only go so far on existing craft. Instead, we have a much shittier iteration of what they build. Some parts are not reused, they are just materials for testing or research. Once again, could be that I explained the process too poorly. We don't reassemble them, we quite literally bum parts and try to make our own, and some parts of the craft we make have to be human-made substitutions. The mechanism for piloting is one such part. We also add things.
What the fuck are you talking about? What actual data do we have on UAPs?
I'm not surprised some people think this way. There's a ton of shrouded information on the topic.
Debunkers annoy the fuck out of me. If you are going to debunk, debunk with fact instead of unsupported opinions.
I think they are necessary, though. They aren't wrong, this community should be skeptical.
Shrugging it off, too. Smoking DMT is a bit unwise.
Then a bunch of governments, including our own, dedicate departments to bullshit.
UFOs influencing human minds supposedly comes from government sources.
I'd be more inclined to believe this aspect alone. A lot of posts in this thread made me wonder if there were more construction units, etc. I also found the memo post interesting specifically because of the year mentioned.
What's his compartment and why is it the ultimate treasure trove?
Even if you don't believe me, I think we can agree the bio department would have more info than me by conversation with them alone. This is before we even include leadership.
Are they following the SpaceX operations?
They respond rather quickly to any type of rocketry. I imagine they will be.
Didn't make any noise, was completely black, like black metal. There is no way a being could resist that sharp turn without turning into a puddle of blood.
They make noise but not very much of it. Also, they can stop inertia when we still struggle with that.
Has any writing been discovered on the crafts?
Yes.
Or any tool inside them?
Yes.
If so, has it been linguistically linked to any known languages?
I'm not sure, but it doesn't look like anything I've seen.
What specifics of the propulsion systems can you reveal?
I covered this already, but as for the Mercury comment, no.
If the U.S. Navy, etc., knows where the construction facility is?
They don't.
A lot of Bob Lazar's is proven BS.
Sauce.
What does the interior of the craft look like? Please describe in detail.
I already did this. It's always cramped and hard to stand fully upright in. For reference, I'm 5 foot 8 inches. There is almost never a storage facility unless it is dedicated to something for the craft. There is always a method of interacting with the craft. Tools are not freely placed around the craft and have dedicated placement.
Have you only ever entered/seen orbs?
The hammers? If so, yes, I've used them.
Or have you been involved with discs too?
No. Be more specific?
It sounds like the Tic Tacs or cigar-shaped ones are transports nobody has gotten a hold of, right?
Cigar-shaped are very rare. Correct, we were told finding one would be career-changing. We suspect they are transports but ultimately don't know.
There are many stories of crash discs. Please elaborate.
I've never seen a disc.
I'm curious to know what you think.
Prior to the zookeeper comment, I thought they looked down on us as vile and worthless with intent to destroy everything around us.
What role do you think Space Force will play in disclosure moving forward?
Openly stated to us discovery for internal use and disinformation to the public.
What can we as a populace do to encourage your bosses to lighten up?
This has always been on my mind. I think if we convinced another nation like China or Russia to come out, the US would have to come out as well. I think having the USAF release their footage was a way to jumpstart SpaceX in a way.
The Pentagon has already reported that the legit UAPs are off-world vehicles not made on this Earth, while OP is claiming they are made in a facility in the oceans.
I stated multiple times we've seen them come and go from the planet. We suspect the construction facility is capable of space travel as well.
He also stated that they were all unmanned.
Reading comprehension issue. I said most of them are unmanned today. This is not strictly the case, and in prior years we dealt with piloted craft quite often.
People with security clearances that large don't just get on 4chan to spill the beans.
You're not wrong, and if it makes you feel better, watching my internet take a shit last night made me panic a bit, if I'm being honest. I could have just ignored your post too.
That allow various agencies to give him free access.
I do not have free access to everything. Visiting crash sites comes with a lot of information by default though.
Providing zero evidence towards his claim. Also, the burden of proof fallacy.
Was I supposed to steal data from work and post it freely here? How about a copy of my clearance or work badge? Yes, Anon let me just out myself completely.
Okay, so element 115 provide the weak gravity field and the engine amplify the phenom through resonance?
The gravity field remains the same for element 115, but the output from the engine produces almost all of the gravity used for travel.
Was the language that Bob Lazar leaked completed?
I've never seen it. Can you post a picture of it?
Any info about the crop circles?
Never seen one or heard of it being relevant.
I have few questions, if you please.
You have a lot, so I'm not answering every single thing.
Has there been any unusual effects on the environment/wildlife?
No, they do study animals.
Why/how are they avoiding Mexico?
One area around there is a bad crash zone for them.
Why was 2002 a big year?
A lot of activities and changes in operation both for them and us. A lot of secrecy issues surfaced that year as a result. Funding also jumped through the roof.
Is this lab stressful?
Very. Strained my marriage greatly.
Does it have anything to do with your illness?
I've wondered about that, but ultimately I'll never know.
What kind of training/qualifications are needed to work in this field?
Your record needs to be clean as fuck. Education can vary.
Do you listen to public sightings or go off your own agency's intel?
Agency intel all the way. Nearly all of it is passed verbally in person.
How does the government prevent or respond to potential national security threats posed by UFOs coming/going in/out of the atmosphere/ocean?
Wait for crashes. The only time everyone is all hands on deck is if they screw with nukes. We mostly just watch and wait for them to fuck up.
Just to steal/learn tech?
This?
MJ-12.
That term is more of a history lesson than anything now.
Then just say it, coward.
Would you like my address too?
OP, if you're dying. Why can't you just tell us the department name and share some photos of documents?
I'd like to appreciate what little I have left. See the above post about last night.
Anyway, why do you think cloaking technology isn't employed by UAPs? It shouldn't be that difficult to bend light.
Fuck, I wish I could show you one of the images from our training. Sometimes we get lucky and find very odd variants of UFOs. Same setup as usual but with interesting additions.
Pays less attention to Epstein.
Will this help? Fuck Epstein.
Do you know where in space they come from? Any star system in particular?
Higher ups knew. I never did.
Any craft found on Earth that was ancient?
None that I saw.
What's it like keeping everything a secret from humanity? What do you do for work, Anon?
I travel and do inspections for the government. Boring stuff, really.
Do you have any idea what's going on in there?
First I've heard of it. Makes me wonder if there were others that did what I did but in different areas.
Plasma physics has developed greatly in the past few decades.
You should be paying attention to things like this long after I leave. Laser technology too.
We're going to hit the bump limit before OP comes back.
Half the thread wants me to keep going, so I'll likely remake. Might need to wait a bit before the weekend will be busy for me.
The abductees that are returned, who are monitored, how are those individuals dealt with?
I suspect another department handles that. We do nothing with them from my end.
Do we know why certain individuals are selected?
Not all, but they like picking from remote areas exposed to radiation or disease.
Capabilities to remove someone, let us say, from a building in a large city without civilians noticing?
They have to get quite close to start the abduction process. Never seen it happen freely in a crowded city. Taking a break until later this evening. As I mentioned, weekend is busy. If the thread dies, I'll attempt to do another.